Hello and welcome. I'm pleased you could be with me tonight. I have one of my favorite guests back. Anne Bancroft is with me, and she's just returned 3 weeks ago, not quite, from an expedition to India, where she and women from all the other continents in our world focused on the subject of fresh water. Access Water was the name of the project, is the name, and I'm delighted to have her here to give us a report and tell us all about it. So welcome, Anne.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yes, I'm so pleased you could do this tonight. Water, I mean, we're all aware of the crisis in our water world, but what drove you to choose this as the topic for this expedition?
Well, you know, I've been working with Lee Arneson for the last 15 plus years, ever since we crossed Antarctica. And we're both former educators, and every expedition that we do, and we've done many since 2000 when we went across that remarkable continent at the bottom of the globe, always has a curriculum. So, you know, I think in a certain way what we love about water, and we were searching for a new project, and we were hungry really to bring back a team. We've been working really just as a pair for so long. And so when we started talking about working with a larger team again, and the challenges and the wonderful gifts that you get from a larger body of people, we also started talking about what would our theme be. And when we went to the Arctic in 2005 and 2007, we were really focused around global warming. And as you know, that's something Will Steger has taken on really as his life's work. And I found it in a certain way confining. Mm-hmm. And I also found that, particularly in the US, that it was a really difficult topic to sort of get around, particularly with young people. And
I think people are so overwhelmed by it.
They're overwhelmed by it. They're, I think, a little bit intimidated and frightened. And particularly in 2005, it was really a vitriolic discussion around global warming, climate change.
Right. Is it real?
Yeah, and we're still talking about that to some extent. But what I love about water is that, much like our other curriculums, it allowed us to talk about everything. We get to talk about economics, we get to talk about politics, we get to talk about global warming.
Right, they're so tied together.
They're so tied together,
right.
And we're experiencing that on so many levels all over the world. We get to talk about gender.
Yes, family roles.
Yeah, as you know, you and I were talking earlier, you know, the amount of time that women and girls spend transporting water in other parts of the world, not being in school because of that, not living their full potential. So water for us was a really exciting sort of umbrella to launch probably our loftiest project. And our project isn't just India. We are going to go to 7 continents.
This is the beginning, isn't it?
This is just the launch, and I'm like already tired thinking about it, because I'm going to be in a walker when I get to Antarctica, the last continent.
In 2026?
26, I think it is. My math is terrible.
This will keep you healthy, right?
It will keep me healthy.
Keep you motivated.
It gives us lots of, I like to say, lateral movement in terms of topics, in terms of adapting over that course of those years with those continents and different waterways, you know, to really adapt to what's happening in the world around water.
So you don't need to set the outline for the whole next 10 years, do you now?
We've already changed it.
You have already?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since going down the Ganges, opened it up to our team being a part of those decisions. You know, the logistics of India was so horrendous. Our next trip was going to be in Africa, and we thought we can't do another continent that's so logistically difficult. whether that be around safety, conflict, just being another third world country, and working within those parameters, those different parameters. So we thought, well, we should maybe shift and give ourselves a break and then come back to Africa, maybe the third trip.
That
So
makes
already
sense,
we're
kind of
redesigning.
A developed country and undeveloped. I have so many questions, but go back for a minute and just tell us why India for the first trip. Why the Ganges for the first focus?
Well, I think the Ganges is in some ways so perfect for us to launch this 7-continent initiative because, one, it's a very long river. It starts in the Himalayas, so it starts at a glacier, so it allowed for us to talk about the issues relating to fresh water around our glaciers.
So it's
in this
pure
country,
up there too.
It's pure, but the glacier is receding, and we got to see rock evidence where this glacier has gone back 3 meters in a very short period of time. And that's a real issue around the globe, whether that's Europe, Africa, Antarctica, Greenland. These glaciers that provide most of our fresh water in the world are receding at a remarkable speed. So we start there. It is pure. We actually swim in the Ganges, which we never expected.
And you did that up in the Himalaya part of the
It was very
river.
cold, very white water. It was and which is allowing the water to be clean.
Right.
But then you move further south, and the river starts to change. And
So ecosystems are hugely different.
very, very different. The farming changes as we go down. The industries change. We see, in terms of industry, we've got one of their challenges is tanneries. So we think of leather, for our handbags and our boots and whatnot, and they're tanning at such a rate, and of course they're not only extracting water from the river, but they're putting it back in, and it's highly polluted. So there's huge efforts to try and do what we're trying to do here on the Mississippi is clean up our industries and the way in which we do business along these remarkable waterways.
I read that at the lower part of the Ganges, the pollution level is the worst of any river probably in the world. It gets a D out of ABCD rating.
Yeah.
And so you were in that kind of water too, as you.
We were, and it's there's wonderful efforts both in a village. There might be tremendous efforts to clean up the waterway in that region, and we ended just outside of Kolkata at the end before we pushed onto the sea, and there's great efforts there to try and clean up the water. But I think what I found is that the Mississippi and the Ganges are very, very similar in a lot of ways, in length, in when it starts at the source here, it's clean, it's just a trickle. Beautiful. It doesn't come out of a glacier. But there's industry, there's farms, there's recreation. There's all sorts of community needs from this large waterway. It's a place of transportation, commerce, relaxation.
We don't
health.
have quite the spiritual connection,
That's
though.
the huge
That
difference.
would be one of the differences.
That is
right.
That's the really big departure, and one of the reasons what we wanted to go to the Ganges, to circle back to your
Although
question.
I'm thinking, as I say that so authoritatively, perhaps the Native American Indians thought of the Mississippi in more spiritual ways than we do commonly now.
And I think that is true. I think what the Ganges holds is that no matter what religion you are in India, and there are many, everybody holds that river sacred.
Not just the Hindus.
Not just the Hindus. There's many, many communities that are Muslim, Christian, and people even who don't feel a religious you know, path in a way, feel that it is sacred.
So the spiritual part in a broad sense
yeah.
is...
And in fact, we carried water from the source. We put it in small bottles and carried it with us. It's a kind of a currency. So if we needed to say thank you to a chief in a village or a leader or a spiritual leader, for instance, or just somebody who maybe hosted us, we could give them a little vial of water, and that was more valuable than rupees.
Wow, that is so
It could be used as
interesting.
bribery, too.
Interesting. So you had lots of little bottles then.
We had lots of little bottles.
To share. Would you say the main goal of the expedition is awareness building, or am I deducting wrongly on that?
Well, certainly awareness is huge. I mean, you have to start there. We use our international team to make links to that awareness. I spent an awful lot of time in India talking about the river I live along, which is the St. Croix, and where I grew up, which is the Mississippi, and talking about my home. So we exchange stories, and we learn stories from the communities that we paddled through. And I think what we really hope to do, we got to a lot of places, and the Indians would say, what are the solutions? We've got so many problems. And we said, we didn't come here for solutions, to bring you solutions about your river. We can tell you what's going on in our hometown. We can tell you what isn't going on, so that you also feel that you're not alone. Because I think there's a huge assumption that we as a Western country have figured it all out. And when I tell them that the Mississippi is in the top 10 with the Ganges River, as one of the top 10 most polluted rivers of the world, most Minnesotans don't know that.
I did not know that either, and I've been reading a lot, and I hadn't read that.
It's astounding. I mean, and I thought we've done a lot in my lifetime to clean it up, but I still wouldn't eat a fish out of there. I don't really choose to swim in the Mississippi. Right. I do paddle on it. So it's, when you start to make those links, you start to realize that you're not alone in the world around these issues. And what we try and do with the K through 12 audience is begin with awareness, begin with a sense of understanding that this is a precious resource, one that is under assault all over the world.
So it's
not
a
just
global problem.
It's a huge global problem.
Their problem.
It's a local problem, whether you're in Minnesota. It's a global problem when whether you're in Antarctica or India, and that there are things that we can do as a global community to share knowledgeable solutions. There are an awful lot of things that we can be doing and are doing, quite frankly. And we want to help young people find their voice. Because, if somebody said to me, well, this is such a huge problem, how do you stay optimistic? And I said, well, I hang out with, millions of young people who feel that there is a better world. There is hope. And we saw a lot of that along the shores of the Ganges. And so my job now is to come home and share that.
It sounds like people came out in big numbers to hear you, to talk with the group. You put on programs with their participation. So a lot of it is building the human connection, as well as looking at water and getting people excited about solutions from all directions and all angles. Just a curious question, you were in boats on the Ganges a lot of the time, but not all the time, right?
Well, we paddled from we hiked up to the Himalayas, and then we actually had to hike back down because it's unnavigable. And it's a stream, it's a babbling, crazy brook. There's no boats able to be there. And then as soon as we get to a place where we can get into a raft and it's whitewater, that's when we're in boats right to the sea.
So you were on water the whole way.
Time. And most of the time in tents.
Yes, I gathered that, but I somehow thought you might have taken buses part of the way, but water all the way. And how many boats then? There were
We had
8
two
of
boats.
you. 2 boats, okay.
boats.
So you were crowded with your equipment?
No, we had 2 trucks
Oh, okay,
that would
drove
take our
along.
gear.
That, okay.
Because we couldn't.
No, you couldn't get, because the boats weren't big. I mean, they
No.
were like raft
Yeah.
kind of boats,
Yeah.
weren't they? Okay,
We did have a
interesting.
road crew, and there were times, I mean, like the Mississippi, we would have to go around dams.
Okay,
There's a
sure.
structure called a barrage in
Right.
India,
And what is that?
it funnels the water through. They can control the channels, much like a dam or a lock.
Okay.
And they use it a lot to flush, actually, a lot of the pollution down river.
And you said they opened some of those up just before your trip, which
Which really allowed
made
for
the
us.
trip much easier. Then,
Yeah, we
right?
would have been doing a lot of pulling the boats in some areas because there's a lot of silt. So we traveled right after the monsoons. And the monsoons come through and the river is flooded. And it's so wide, you sometimes can't even see the shoreline for the shoreline. And when we came down, it was after the monsoons, and so sometimes we would hit sandbars and we'd have to get out into that water, which I wasn't always very keen about,
I bet.
and pull these rafts until they were unstuck, and then we'd get back in again.
Did you stay healthy? Did the group stay
We
healthy?
stayed really healthy. I mean,
good.
we were very clean. Our crew was, we washed our hands before every meal kind of thing. And you felt dirty because there is air pollution, particularly when you got into bigger cities. And we would usually camp. Nobody does this, by the way.
I'm
There are
guessing.
no motors on this river. There's, until you get to the ocean or down till near Calcutta, you see no motorboats. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly you're seeing container ships, huge ocean.
Okay.
But we're the only ones on the water moving down the river. Everybody else is in either wooden fishing boats, or wooden ferries ferrying people, tractors, cows,
Because
whatever
there aren't too many
across.
bridges across.
There
I
are very
read
few
like
bridges.
3. So people must have looked at your little group and were very surprised and intrigued, and
We drew a crowd wherever we
I
went.
bet.
And then we were all women.
Yes, all women. And tell us where the girls were from. And I'm saying girls because most of your team were really quite young, right?
They were pretty young, which was by design, by the way, because it's their world. So Liv and I were the 2
seniors.
we were the senior citizens of the group. And then, so we had a South African, we had a New Zealand woman, an Israeli Arab. She's really interesting for that reason alone. We had a woman from China and from Chile. How am I doing? I think that's
Norway
it.
for leave.
Norway for leave, and the U.S. for me. And really, right now we are hosting 6 women from 6 continents.
Right.
So we kind of get a bye, but we try and cover the globe.
And each of those continents that the 6 women are from have different water issues, don't they? And that was part of your planning, right?
Yep.
To bring in awareness of issues that were different in each continent.
Yeah.
That was intriguing. Good
And it
idea.
was, it was very interesting too to travel. And every time we did presentations and we introduced our team, one that, even in the villages, they were very knowledgeable about the countries that we came from, the areas that we came from. And that was really impressive. You don't always get that actually in the United States.
No, I'm sure not.
So people are reading and really paying attention to what's happening in the globe. And certain areas of the river got certain responses. So Ulfat from Israel, when she talked about coming from such a small country, and one that's under conflict so much of the time, and has no fresh water. You know, they're doing a lot of, you know, salination solutions around their issues because they're in a desert. And then you talk, you know, you introduce Jiao Jiao from China, and she gets a reaction, one, because they border India. They're similar in population.
They've got a lot of pollution also.
And they've got a lot of pollution, and the Indians know this, and so they're very, very curious. Plus, she's exotic because she's the fairest one in our group, and that is really an intrigue for them.
I bet.
And she covers up like a classic Chinese.
In choosing the women, we don't have a lot of time to go into this, but just briefly, how did you pick one person from each continent?
We really put together a two-page sort of vision and mission document, and then we had 5 questions. And we put it out there through all of our global channels, educators, outdoor groups. And really what it said was that you didn't have to be a hardcore expedition person. What we were really looking for was a passion to make the world a better place in some small way. And so we wanted women to really have that passion, you know, to really want to do something with this. Certainly utilize the adventure part, but I would say that they're all basically in some ways educators.
And they all have a lot of interesting background in terms of education, don't they, with environmental studies.
Not always traditional.
So forth, but yeah, reading about them, I was impressed with them.
They're fantastic.
Having known some about your polar expeditions and how physically challenging those were, what was the physical challenge on this trip? It would be very, very different.
You know, this trip was not physically demanding. I think it was emotionally demanding, psychologically. I mean, we're in a group of 8 again. We really don't separate much. We're elbow to elbow in the boats, and then there's all these people.
And for 2 months, I don't think we mentioned that, 60 days.
And then, you know, even if we stop along the shores and it looks rural, and we put out our tarp to have a little trail lunch, suddenly there's 50 people standing around.
So you never had downtime, so to speak, did you?
Not really.
I bet,
and you know, and I think most of us are introverts. We had a couple of extroverts.
That'd be hard. And you'd never taken a trip with these people before, so there was the adjusting.
Yeah, we got along really, really well. But it's, you know, it is still, there's a tension when, you know, no matter how extroverted you are or whatever, just, you know, just because you're always there.
Sure, that's a huge thing. I remember you telling me that on the first trip that you did with Will to the North Pole, you had to sleep in a sleeping bag with one of the guys.
2 other
guys? I'd forgotten that. I was thinking it's just 2 of you. And how the ice would melt before the end of the night. And I mean, just that stuck with me all these years.
Yeah,
now,
me
this
too.
isn't that kind. Yeah, I bet. This isn't that kind of a physical thing, but as you said, probably emotionally very similar to some of the challenges on any trip where you're with a group and so interdependent. And just logistically, you had all kinds of challenges, as you alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
Including raising money and.
You know, well, we had a challenge we have sponsors from all over the globe, and one sponsor, a week before we were to depart, an Indian sponsor, actually it was the Minister of Tourism, dropped out. And so there went all of our flights and travel and accommodations. and it's primarily, the flight. So that was a jolt a week before
That's
departure.
horrible timing too,
It's
not
just terrible
long enough to really
So there's that, and that's somewhat, some of it is cultural. But the roads in India were really tough for our crew that had the 2 trucks that were trying to follow us. And nobody really does this kind of thing. So just the logistics of finding enough places to put the tents.
So just one
Under
thing
a
after
bridge.
another. Yeah, and having to be creative. Well, we are out of time almost. I want to, this has just gone way too fast. I want to give folks a couple websites because I'm sure you're wanting to learn more after hearing Ann talk. First, you can go to her website, yourexpedition.com, or you can also check out her foundation website, Bancroft Foundation.org. Both of these will tie you into more blogs and more photos and info on the trip. But maybe I can have you back sometime when we can talk more about
I'd love it.
other details, because the things you came away and have learned, you've shared some, but I want to hear more ideas what we can do in this country. I read before I met Ann now tonight that 1/6 of our world is not having water that's safe to drink or bathe in. 1/6, and that just isn't going to work.
No.
So, well, thank you so much,
you
Ann.
so
It's
much
great
for
to have
having
you
me.
back. Thank you for being with Ann and I. I'll see you next week. Until then, have a good week.